Let's move into the winners and losers, guys. I think kind of the three consensus winners I've seen thrown out there in draft Twitter, draft, universe are the Eagles, Texans, and Seahawks. So I want to start with Philly. For us, a division rival here in Dallas, right? And I know time after time, pick after pick, we were just kicking ourselves because it seems like the Philly, even not just this year, but the last two or three drafts, have just done a fantastic job of adding talent. They're becoming Georgia North, adding three more
Yep.
defenders from Georgia's national championship teams. Jalen Carter with the 9th overall pick, Nolan Smith with the 31st overall pick. And then I think one of the absolute steals of the drafts in Keely Ringo at the top of the fourth. Guys, Philly is coming for the NFL. They're here to stay after going to the Super Bowl this year and locking up their quarterback. And they're bringing all the elite defensive talent, especially from the SEC, with them.
Here's what Philly does better than anyone else. Howie Roseman, and I wrote this over on the Transfer Portal CFB website in my 5 big things after the first round. Howie Roseman plays chess. Everyone else plays checkers when it comes to moving up and down the draft board. Howie's not afraid to get involved. When he sees an opportunity, he's not afraid to go up. But it's not his habit, right? He's not a trade up only guy. He will also trade back if that scenario plays itself out. And we saw kind of both ends of that spectrum, where Philly is able to take Jalen Carter, number 1 talent available on many draft boards at number 9, the defensive tackle from Georgia. Now, character concerns are definitely there. Legal concerns are definitely there. But Philly, no doubt, did their homework on him and has a very veteran defensive line. They feel like they're going to put him in an ecosystem that will nurture him, that will help him mature quicker than maybe some other franchises might. Then they go and get a twitchy, fast, bendy edge in Nolan Smith, his teammate, also from Georgia. And just like that, they've added this wave of youth, of power, and of bend to a pass rush and to a run stopping unit that was leaky when it came to stopping the run. They led the NFL in sacks last year. So now you've shored up their number 1 concern, what essentially lost them the Super Bowl against Kansas City. And oh, by the way, you were able to address offensive tackle in Tyler Steen. You get a tackle of the future. You get more secondary help in Sidney Brown and Keely Ringo. I think Keely Ringo probably slides back to a safety. I think he's way too susceptible to the double move, to the hesitation. If he's a press man corner, he was really bad at that in Georgia. And then, you take a shot on a guy like Tanner McKee, who, you guys remember, Tanner McKee had some first round mocks when
Yes,
this
he
whole thing
did.
started,
Yes, he did.
which none of us understood. But he
He
gets
went,
selected
where'd
in
he
the
go?
6th
Fifth round?
6th round.
Sixth round. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Howie Roseman, just tip of the cap. They address all their needs except for they didn't get a running back in the draft, but they trade for DeAndre Swift from Detroit for a 4th and a 7th. The Eagles are going to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm willing to stake my sports reputation on that.
Yeah, and because of that, I'd like to formally protest that they're allowed to do that and try to look up some kind of rule that doesn't let them do it because I don't like the Eagles, so that makes it hard for me. It's not a bad strategy to just draft Georgia defenders right
Yeah.
now. I mean, look, if you're a team in the NFL and you want good defenders, I know that everyone has their grades on guys, but they've kind of been able to reassemble like the best pieces of that Georgia defense from a couple
Yep.
years ago that averaged like 7 points per game or something like that. They've been able to reassemble like I think 5 of those guys now.
Yep.
They got a bunch of those guys together. So I mean, good for them. I personally hate it, but good for them for being able to get put in that spot.
Other winners on the night, I know the Texans finessed their way to 2 of the top 3 consensus players in the draft in CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. They gave up a lot to do it, but I think the consensus out there is that it was worth the draft capital they gave up to move back up to 3. I know it set Twitter on fire when
Yep.
the Texans took CJ Stroud, and all of a sudden they're taking Will Anderson 3rd as well. And the Seattle Seahawks, I think, just did a heck of a job with this draft. Not always been able to say that about Seattle in the past decade or so, but getting Devon Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round, getting guys like Zach Charbonnet, Cameron Young in the 4th, what I thought was a fantastic pick for them. Up and down the board, I thought both of those two teams did a great job.
Yeah, Houston actually, funny story on them. I was out of the ballpark during the draft, so I didn't get to watch most of it live, but I was kind of following on my phone. and there was an audible like gasp from the other people in the crowd that were watching this and trying to follow this, like, whoa, Houston just traded up to 3. Whoa. And so, it's obviously a bit of a splash move, kind of something I think most of us didn't necessarily expect. But in my opinion, they got an excellent quarterback and maybe the best player on the board, Will Anderson Jr., very, very good player. So, yeah, I don't think you could almost say who cares about the rest of their draft. You get those two players, you're instantly going to be a better team next year, trying to compete, trying to get up off the mat a little bit, watching some of the other teams in your division have, moderate success, but maybe, Tennessee's window's closing a little bit. So good for them for investing in some younger players and hopefully trying to be competitive over the next, 5 or so years.
Seattle was another team that let the board fall to them, right? They go and get their guy in Devin Witherspoon, who, boy, I tell you what, I feel a little foolish because when I first started this process, Devin Witherspoon was my cornerback number one. The more I read, the more I researched and kind of tried to guess maybe more where guys would go rather than just sticking to my guy. I moved off Witherspoon as my cornerback one, ended up going to Christian Gonzalez, who goes in the first round too. He goes to the Patriots at 14, which what a steal for New England
Great
that
pick
was.
for them, yeah.
Joey Porter Jr., another personal favorite of mine, slides out of the first round entirely, right to the first pick of the second round. But Witherspoon's a fun guy. He's physical. He's nasty. He knows how to take you off your feet, make a tackle in space. He's got good ball skills as well. He's going to get flagged a little bit early on. I think he plays a little too aggressively with his hands. But when you talk about Seattle trying to get back to what made them great, an elite defense that could shut down whatever you tried to do in the passing game, Devin Witherspoon is a guy that can help you do that. They also go and find Jackson Smith-Njigba at the end of the first round, the first wide receiver off the board in what ended up being a run of 4 receivers. And then the picks that they make throughout the rest of that draft, Derek Hall in the second, edge rusher, Alabama. Zach Charbonnet went a little bit early for my take, running back out of UCLA, but they get Anthony Bradford, guard out of LSU in the 4th round as well. All of those guys, maybe aside from Charbonnet, have a real chance to start from day one and be impact players. Like Anthony Bradford is a ready-made guard in the 4th round that we were hoping would fall all the way to Dallas. And I was hoping they would actually move up to go get them with the hole that they have at left guard. So, yeah, I just thought Seattle did such a tremendous job. They get depth pieces in the 4th through 7th round. I really loved what they did in this draft. And they needed to, right? They needed to put a lot of pieces around Geno Smith and rebuild that defense, and I think they did that.
Yeah, I know the dynasty community, the dynasty fantasy community is just kicking themselves that Zach Charbonnet is going to Seattle to be paired with Kenneth Walker, but that is that's a fantastic backfield. I think that's going to cause a lot of problems. And Geno Smith having 3 legit wide receivers to throw to is going to be fantastic for the guys up in the Pacific Northwest. Real quickly, going through some of the consensus losers, our Dallas Cowboys. I think a lot of people are just kind of scratching their heads, not necessarily with the first round pick. I think, Mozzie Smith was certainly a solid talent. I think that frees up Micah Parsons a lot to do what he needs to do on the back end of that pass rush. The Detroit Lions trading back to, 11th overall and taking Jahmyr Gibbs as the second
12th.
running back off the board. Yeah, 12th overall. Shocked a lot of people. Another shocking moment in that first round and left a lot of people scratching their heads when there were certainly other players on the board they could have taken, and Gibbs was kind of a consensus second round guy. And the Washington Commanders, I think, just sitting pat and not taking a flyer on Hendon Hooker when they had not 1 but 2 chances to do so in the first and second rounds, I think probably has their fans pretty frustrated as well. I'll let you guys take that wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the losers of this draft in a year where it seemed like it was very cheap to move up outside of the top 10 picks, right? You mentioned Houston paid a king's ransom, a first and a third next year as well, in addition to some draft capital from this year. But by and large, the rest of the draft, it seemed very cheap to move up. It was taking a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick to move up late in the first, early in the second round. And for me, teams that were a little too cautious, like Dallas, for my tastes, that sat back and watched their board just disintegrate at the top of a round, when like Dallas needed a starting guard, something terrible.
Mhm.
And instead they wait until the 4th round with a compensatory pick to take a kid in Akeem Richards, I believe that's his last name, from UNC, played tackle, right? Like not a natural guard. He's got good balance, but overall he's got a lot to clean up. For me, the Cowboys are a couple of pieces away from contending for an NFC championship. You hit a home run with Tyler Smith, not a popular pick last year. I was one of the first to say I don't agree with that pick, and Tyler Smith proved me wrong. I don't think there's really any way I can be proven wrong that, hey, your offensive line objectively did not get better by you waiting basically 5 rounds to go get someone to plug and play along that offensive line. It concerns me when the price of admission early in some of those rounds, especially once you got to the 3rd round, was not something that you're going to find an NFL starter later on in that draft with.
Yeah, I think the big one is just like you were talking about, Trey, with Washington. And I would even put teams like Tampa Bay in this list of people who didn't go for Hendon
Yeah.
when they could have. We talked about that. I understand he's older. I understand there's some issues, but we're going to pretend once again, like if he doesn't get hurt last season, that he's not an obvious first rounder just off of the skill level and the numbers and the prestige you would have had off of this season. I don't understand how, and I'm not saying he should have been a first rounder this year. Obviously, the injury factors in, but you had teams that had a chance at him and need a quarterback, and they don't take that chance. And just some of the choices instead were a little bit of head scratchers. And so I think if you're going to list losers, you have to look at teams who just don't address those kinds of things, specifically at the quarterback spot when you need a quarterback, when you've got pieces on your roster that can help you compete, can help you try to win your division and make some noise in the playoffs. And you're just not willing to go get your quarterback. You're not willing to go get a guy who can, possibly help you. I mean, is Tampa Bay saying that Kyle Trask is the answer? Because I don't think that Kyle Trask is the answer.
I hope not.
I'm not going to lie. I don't think Kyle Trask is the answer.
And they're probably a team. They're sorry to cut you off, Gary, but they're probably going to be a team that's right in the middle of the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. If I had to guess this year, they have a lot of talent, but man,
almost have to be. But you're letting that talent age one more year, contracts go one more year. If those players don't play well, then you have to ask yourself, is it just a quarterback? If they play well, you got to extend them and pay them more. And so it's an interesting decision for me to want to kick this one another year down the road for a lot of these teams. Maybe not all of them. I get, certain teams they like their guy, they want to go after their guy, but there's a lot of teams that I'd look at this and say you're gonna stake your hopes into one or two guys next year, not knowing how next year's gonna go. I'm a little nervous about that, if you ask me.
And it's kind of ironic. We did include the Lions with our losers of the draft. They were the ones that took Hendon Hooker.
Sure.
And I think, if I'm going to hitch my wagon to Hendon personally, guys.
Me too.
If he gets the chance to perform, I don't know that he will, because Jared Goff is a very established guy in Detroit, and they seem to love Jared Goff up there. And he's performed pretty well up there since he's gotten up to Detroit. But if Hendon Hooker gets a chance, he's not going to look back, in my opinion. Now, will he get that chance? That remains to be seen. But definitely one of my favorite players to see, kind of later round guys, not the third's late, but just later, not first round guys, to see how that career develops.
Gracious hip, how